13 stars from the golden age with disabled children that you never knew about. Have you ever stopped, amidst the classic films and the glamorous stories of Hollywood, to wonder that behind the radiant smiles on the silver screen, those great icons had to endure silent pains, irreplaceable losses, the stories that the press rarely mentions, the secrets hidden through decades, will now be revealed. Imagine a mother willing to trade all her Oscar awards just so her daughter could walk without pain, or a heroic father on film who had to kneel before the invisible illness of his son. These stories are not only touching, but also contain mysteries that make you ponder, does fame really bring happiness? Or is it just a shell covering the pain? First is Elizabeth Taylor. I could trade all awards, all roles, if that could soothe your pain. In 1961, when the world was still infatuated with the beauty of Cleopatra and her legendary violet eyes, Elizabeth Taylor shocked the European press, not because of a new role or a scandalous romance, but because of the image of her in an orphanage in Munich, Germany, holding a small baby girl wrapped in a cream-colored blanket. The baby's name was Maria Burton. Born on August 1, 1961, a German orphan with a cruel fate right from birth. From the first moment the doctor delivered the cold verdict on Elizabeth's shoulders, Maria was born with congenital hip dysplasia. If not surgically intervened early and continuously, those tiny legs would never move. Normally, she would live a disabled life, pushed to the margins by society at that time. Eddie Fisher, her husband at the time, was stunned for a moment, but she only tightened her arms more, letting her eyes sink deeply into the child's eyes like a silent promise. Later, she recounted in her memoir that at that moment, I no longer thought about the illness. I only saw a pair of eyes desperately seeking a safe embrace, and I knew I had to be that embrace. On the flight back to Los Angeles, Elizabeth couldn't sleep a minute. Every soft sob of her daughter made her bend down to kiss her forehead, whispering lullabies amid the sobs. The passengers on that flight would never forget the sight of a movie star holding her child tightly to her chest, as if loosening for a second would make the whole world around her collapse. But Elizabeth's path to motherhood was not paved with roses. As soon as Maria started walking, the hip pain struck, causing the girl to fall to the floor many times. Doctors at Cedars-Sinai advised multiple surgeries, and Elizabeth went through more than 30 operations for her daughter in the early years. Once, while filming Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Elizabeth received news that Maria needed immediate surgery. She left the set immediately, still in costume, rushing to the car with only one thought in mind: right now, I have to be with my child. The press often saw Elizabeth leaving the set in glamorous splendor, but few witnessed her sitting for hours on a cold plastic chair outside the operating room, hands clenched until white, eyes fixed on the red sign saying the surgery was in progress. On another occasion, after a surgery lasting more than 4 hours, Elizabeth entered the recovery room. Maria lay still, her face pale and wrinkled. Elizabeth gently lifted her daughter's small hand to her cheek, her voice trembling as if making a vow. If I have to trade all awards, all roles, even my career, I will do it. As long as you no longer suffer, my Maria. In the following years, Maria learned to walk slower but still limped, but whenever she saw her daughter smile while walking through the garden in front of the house, Elizabeth knew that the girl had won the most important Oscar in life. Updated to 2025, Maria Burton Carson, now 64 years old, lives a private life in New Jersey, married to Richard Carson, and has children. She once tried modeling but chose a private lifestyle, away from the flashlights. Richard Burton, Elizabeth's second husband, also adopted Maria, and despite the marriage breakdown, Elizabeth's love for her daughter remained eternal. As someone who has followed Hollywood for decades, I must say that Elizabeth Taylor's story is not just about a mother's sacrifice, but also proof of the power of love overcoming all social barriers and fame. She, with her legendary beauty and scandal-filled life, proved that behind the glamour is a sincere mother's heart, ready to trade everything. Analyzing deeper, the decision to adopt Maria while her own health was weak, after many surgeries and illnesses, shows Elizabeth was not just a star, but a true humanitarian. I see this story as a reminder that family love is the most precious thing, surpassing time and fame. Would you be willing to trade everything like her? And Elizabeth Taylor is not the only one who had to endure such pain. Another Hollywood legend, Robert Redford, also faced harsh reality when his son suddenly passed away just 2 months after birth, a loss he carried for life. Before the world called Robert Redford a Hollywood legend, he was just a 23-year-old newlywed, living with his wife Lola Van Wagenen in a small apartment in New York. They didn't have much money, but they had love and eager anticipation for their first child, the brightest hope for the future ahead. On summer evenings in 1959, Robert sat by the window, carefully building a wooden crib for his little one. He chose white paint, sanding every edge because he feared the tiny hands might get scratched. Every time he passed by, he couldn't help imagining a baby boy lying still, gently stirring in sleep. When the morning sun shone through the window onto the red little face of Scott Anthony Redford in September, the baby let out his first cry. Robert remembered clearly the moment his son's small hand gripped his finger, a weak grip but strong enough to make him tremble. In that moment, he silently promised, "I will protect you no matter what happens." But fate chose a cruel way to test that vow. Just a few weeks later, Scott began showing strange signs. The baby cried in fits, breathing rapidly. His eyes closed tightly for hours as if wanting to avoid the light and the outside world. The doctor said it might just be a cold, but Lola felt a chilling unease invading her heart. On November 17th, 1959, New York was hit by a fierce cold. Robert was at an audition when the phone rang. On the other end, Lola's voice was broken and shattered. "Robert, he's not breathing anymore. He doesn't remember how he left the set. Only that when he arrived at the hospital, the emergency room was filled with the smell of disinfectant under glaring white lights." The doctor slowly walked out, shaking his head slowly and heavily as if the whole world was closing. Scott was gone. The cause was sudden infant death syndrome, an invisible enemy that medicine at the time couldn't fully explain. Robert held his son's already cold body tightly. He pressed his cheek to his son as if trying to transfer his warmth and breath, clinging to even the faintest hope. But it was too late. 2 months, that was all the time Scott had on this earth. 2 months is too short for a child to know his father's voice, but long enough to turn a man into a father and only to take away the most precious thing. This loss was not the only one in Redford's life. In 2020, he had to endure similar pain when his second son, James Redford, passed away at 58 from bile duct cancer, a rare disease causing pale stools and severe abdominal pain. James was a talented filmmaker, and his death devastated Redford, but also motivated him to join campaigns raising awareness about cancer. Many years later, at the height of fame in Hollywood, Robert still mentioned Scott in interviews. In The Guardian, he once said, "There are losses that time will never heal. You just learn to live with them as if a lost part of the body is always in pain." On the outside, Robert Redford is the strong image of challenging characters in films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or All the President's Men. But deep inside, he is still the father who sat for hours in a dark room holding a tiny blanket, still faintly smelling of milk from his son, silent until dawn broke. Updated to 2025 at 89 years old, Robert Redford still lives with his family, including his remaining children, Shauna, Amy, and grandchildren. He has retired from acting but continues charitable activities, especially through the Sundance Institute, where he often mentions family losses as inspiration for resilience. Robert Redford's story is a painful reminder of the fragility of life, especially for those of us at our age who have gone through many losses. The pain of losing a child shaped him, making his roles have deeper emotion. Personally, I think these tragedies turned him from an actor into a humanitarian icon, teaching us that true strength lies in endurance and continuing to live. Can you imagine that pain? Third is John Travolta. The seizure took away his 16-year-old son, John Travolta, a face deeply etched in the memories of millions of film lovers with mesmerizing dance steps in Saturday Night Fever, charm in Grease, and triumphant return in Pulp Fiction. On the silver screen, he is the embodiment of attraction and dazzling victories. But behind those bright lights, there is a chapter in his life that every mention makes the heart ache as if a wound is being torn open. In 1992, in Los Angeles, Jet Travolta let out his first cry. That was the moment John and his wife, actress Kelly Preston, had waited for throughout the years. Appearing on Good Morning America, John once shared that when he held his newborn son tightly, he could clearly feel that from that moment. His life would revolve around one single mission, protecting his son from all dangers. Jet's early days were overshadowed by cruel fate. At just 2 years old, doctors at Cedars-Sinai diagnosed the boy with Kawasaki disease, a rare illness that can directly attack the heart and other vital organs. Gradually, signs of autism began to appear, accompanied by severe seizures that kept the whole family on high alert. Their home in Ocala, Florida, was renovated by John and Kelly into a complete therapy space, a physical therapy room, a play area designed for absolute safety, and a team of nurses on duty 24/7. Kelly once choked up on Oprah Winfrey's show, saying that just seeing Jet smile made all her worries vanish. Amid stressful days, there were still peaceful moments interspersed, like driving a golf cart with Dad under the golden afternoon sun, sitting for hours with Mom coloring a picture, or enjoying the sunshine and wind on the Bahamas beach together. But that fragility was as thin as morning mist. On the morning of January 2, 2009, while the family was vacationing in Old Bahama Bay, the gentle sea breeze and golden dawn sunlight, Jet said he wanted to go to the bathroom. Just a few minutes later, a heavy sound rang out, piercing and cold. When John and the hotel staff rushed in, the sight before them made him breathless. Jet lay motionless on the tile floor, his head hitting the bathtub hard. This seizure was too violent, sweeping the boy away like an unstoppable storm. Kelly collapsed, her voice calling her son, tearing the air. John held his son's gradually cooling body tightly to his chest, shaking him hard. "Jet, can you hear, Dad? Open your eyes." Everything sank into cruel silence. Jet was taken to Rand Memorial Hospital, but the doctor's announcement closed all doors of hope. 16 years of life ended on a seemingly peaceful morning. The news flooded CNN, People, ABC News, but no headline could describe the level of pain. A few months later, John and Kelly returned to the public. In a conversation with Barbara Walters, tears couldn't stop his choked voice as he said that since Jet left, a part of his soul had disappeared. He was willing to trade all awards, all roles just to hug his son one more time. That emptiness is forever etched in his heart, reminding the world that even at the peak of fame, losing a child is the greatest tragedy a person can endure. Updated to 2025, John Travolta, now 71, still lives with his 2 remaining children, Ella Blue, 25 years old, and Benjamin, 14 years old. He just welcomed the new year 2025 with a family photo on Instagram, with radiant smiles, but everyone knows the pain of losing Jet and wife Kelly Preston, who passed away in 2020 from breast cancer, is still there. Ella is pursuing a career in acting and singing, while Ben is passionate about sports. John continues filming and flying private planes, but he often shares that family is the only source of strength. As someone who has witnessed many tragic stories of stars, I find John Travolta's case particularly heartbreaking because it happened when he was at the peak of his career. Perhaps faith in Scientology helped him overcome, but that pain is still an unfading scar, affecting how he raises his remaining children, always protecting them from public eyes. I think this is a lesson about cherishing every moment with children, because life is too fragile and nothing can replace family love. Can you imagine that pain when a sudden seizure takes away everything? Fourth is Sylvester Stallone. When the invincible hero had to kneel before his son's illness, in 1979, Los Angeles shone under the lights of glory. Rocky had just propelled Sylvester Stallone to the top of Hollywood, with the press praising him as the new icon of the era. But amid the cheers, the moment that filled Stallone's heart with pride did not appear on screen. It was the moment he walked out of Cedars-Sinai Hospital, holding his newborn son, Sergio Stallone, in his arms. His face at that time was radiant like a warrior who had just won the biggest victory in life, the victory of a father holding his own flesh and blood for the first time. In the early years, Sergio's life unfolded in the boundless love of his parents. His hair was soft as silk. His deep eyes reflected his father's image, his rare smile warm like morning sunshine. Stallone often told friends that just opening the door and seeing his son look at him made all the stress and fatigue on set vanish as if they never existed. Then, the first cracks began to appear in their happy picture. Sergio rarely responded when called, often retreated to a corner, patiently lining up toys in straight rows, avoiding sudden hugs. Sasha Chak, his wife, initially thought he was just reserved, but the afternoons they called his name dozens of times, only to be met with heavy silence sowed seeds of fear in their hearts. In 1982 at UCLA Medical Center, the doctor delivered the diagnosis in a tense atmosphere: severe congenital autism. The sound of the pen scratching on paper echoed ominously in the silent room. Stallone bowed his head, eyes staring at his shoes, as if the whole world had just collapsed before him. Many years later, in an interview with People magazine, he said, "I've been knocked down hundreds of times on screen, but no blow was as painful as that moment. From that moment, the Rambo on screen entered a battle without applause, without a clear opponent to defeat. He reduced his filming schedule, pouring all his time, energy, and money into therapy for his son. Every speech exercise, every hour of physical therapy, every new method, even unproven, he embraced them as if each fragile opportunity was the only lifeline. The smallest progress from Sergio became a priceless treasure. One day, after many months of silence, he suddenly called, "Dad!" Stallone burst into tears right in the therapy room, oblivious to those around. The gentle touch from his son's hand was something he would remember for life. But amid those moments, there were still nagging pains. Many times he stood from afar watching his son sadly look at other children, a feeling of helplessness tightening in his chest. Friends recall the time Stallone left the therapy center with heavy shoulders, face bowed as if carrying a gloomy sky. But when passing photographers, he immediately smiled as if just leaving a successful press conference. Sasha once whispered that Stallone hid the pain deep inside because he knew that once it erupted, he could never contain it again. More than 45 years have passed, and Sergio, now 46, still lives with the family and needs special care every day. Updated to 2025, Sergio lives privately, away from the lights, but Stallone still spends time with him, even though he has 3 daughters with his current wife, Jennifer Flavin. This battle has never ended, and Stallone has never left the front line. His love is not noisy, not scripted, not supported by victorious music, but persistent, resilient, and stronger than any hero he ever portrayed on screen. Stallone represents the image of a real-life heroic father, where strength lies not in muscles but in perseverance. And the autism diagnosis at that time was a great mystery, making him a pioneer in raising awareness. I admire how he turned pain into motivation, and this probably influenced his later roles, making them more authentic. We can learn from him that family love is an endless source of strength. Fifth is Gene Tierney, the pain and torment of a mother. In the 1940s, when Hollywood was in its golden age, Gene Tierney was the icon of beauty and talent, with roles in Laura and Leave Her to Heaven captivating audiences. But behind that perfect exterior was a personal tragedy few knew. While pregnant with her first daughter, Jean contracted rubella from a fan at a party, leading to her daughter Daria Tierney being born in 1943 with severe intellectual, visual, and hearing disabilities. Daria was deaf, partially blind, and intellectually delayed, having to live in a nursing home for life. Jean lived in lifelong torment, even writing in her 1979 memoir Self-Portrait that she felt she was the cause of her child's pain, and this contributed to her mental health issues, leading to multiple hospitalizations. Jean spent years taking her daughter to therapy, giving up many major roles to be with her, though her marriage to Oleg Cassini broke down partly due to this pressure. Daria passed away in 2010 at age 66 after a life of special care. The press at the time reported little, but those who knew were touched by her silent sacrifice. Updated to 2025, Jean's story is still retold through documents and YouTube videos, like Whatever Happened to Jean Tierney's Two Daughters, emphasizing Daria's tragedy and her sister Christina, born 1948, healthy but affected by family life. Jean Tierney's case reflects the lack of medical knowledge at the time, where infectious diseases like rubella could change a whole life, and it promoted later vaccination campaigns. This is a story of regret and redemption, reminding us of the value of health and family love, especially in old age when we look back on past mistakes. The mystery here is, did that fan know they caused such a great tragedy? Sixth is Shaquille O'Neal. His son nearly died from heart surgery. Shaquille O'Neal, the king of basketball with giant height and radiant smile. But few know that he once knelt by his son's hospital bed. Shareef O'Neal. Born in 2000, Shareef was diagnosed with congenital heart disease, anomalous coronary artery, a life-threatening condition. In 2018, at age 18, he underwent open-heart surgery at UCLA, where doctors had to repair the abnormal coronary artery. Shaq recounted in interviews, like on Netflix, that he prayed all night, fearing he would lose his son forever, and he even cried seeing his son relearn to walk after surgery. The surgery was successful, but the scar on Shareef's chest remains a reminder of that battle, and he had to miss his college basketball season. Shaq used his fame to raise awareness about heart disease in children, establishing a charity fund and sharing the story to encourage early health checks. Updated to 2025, Shareef, now 25, is playing professional basketball for G League Ignite, and he often talks about his journey in podcasts like Now for Later, where he emphasizes that the surgery saved his life and made him stronger. Recently, he also grieved the loss of a close friend in an accident, but continues his career. Shaq is not just an athlete, but also an exemplary father, turning pain into positive action, and this case shows that even giants have weaknesses. This story makes me think about the power of faith, especially in old age when we face fragile health, and it adds a layer of mystery. Would Shareef become an NBA star like his father without the illness? Shaquille O'Neal's fear of nearly losing his son reminds of another father, Arthur Miller, one of America's greatest playwrights, but fate was even crueler to him when his son was born with Down syndrome. Seventh is Arthur Miller, the wound he buried until his last breath. Arthur Miller, America's stage genius, author of Death of a Salesman and The Crucible, who sowed seeds for millions with words exposing the human condition. But there was a role he never wanted to step on stage for, the role of a father carrying a secret that no stage light could touch. In 1966, in his marriage to photographer Inga Morath, a baby boy, Daniel Miller, was born. In the delivery room, the doctor announced the boy had Down syndrome. At that time, the cruel advice was given with frightening calm: send the boy to a nursing home, it will be better for everyone. In that moment, amid the baby's weak cries and Inga's blank eyes, Miller had to sign a decision that would follow him for the rest of his life, sending his son to a facility for disabled children in Connecticut. From then on, Daniel grew up behind strange walls, far from family arms. In the public eye, the boy almost didn't exist. In interviews, Miller talked about politics, art, his famous romances like with Marilyn Monroe, but never once mentioned his second son. People thought he had forgotten, but the truth was a silent pain, hard as stone, unbreakable. Those close to him said he still quietly visited his son, bringing carefully wrapped picture books and wooden toys. He sat by the bed telling Daniel stories of distant lands, winter seas, wind blowing through prairies, knowing his son couldn't fully understand. He still spoke just to hear the soft laughter when his voice reached his son's ears. But the distance between them wasn't a few miles. It was an ocean of silence that Miller could never cross. In notes found after his death in 2005, there was a line that tore readers' hearts. "There are things a father cannot explain. Only that he loved his son, but that love was locked behind closed doors." Arthur Miller carried that wound to the grave, a wound born from societal pressure at the time, but also a sentence he imposed on himself. And it remains there, a cold void in the legacy of a man who understood the human heart better than anyone. Updated to 2025, Daniel Miller, now 59, lives healthily with a foster family in Connecticut. And his story is retold through books like Fall in 2018, where actor Nolan James Tierce played Daniel in the play. Analyzing, Miller's decision reflects 1960s societal prejudices about disabilities, where children like Daniel were pushed aside, and it raises questions about the ethics of a great writer. I see this as the greatest tragedy of a playwright who told stories about people but hid his own, and it makes us think about how society has changed, but family secrets still remain hidden. Eighth is Patricia Neal. In October 1962, the New York Times unexpectedly published a small note in the society section. Oscar-winning actress Patricia Neal temporarily withdraws from all film activities for family reasons. The brief line revealed nothing, but behind it was an emotional storm that no newspaper could fully describe. Daughter Olivia Dahl, 7 years old, was the joy of Patricia and her husband, writer Roald Dahl. Just a few days before, Olivia had run through Central Park. Then one afternoon, the girl came home with a light fever. Her mother thought it was just a cold. But as night fell, Olivia suddenly became disoriented. Her voice became hard to hear, and then she collapsed. The diagnosis from Lenox Hill Hospital was like a statement about encephalitis from measles complications, a rare disease that aggressively attacks the brain. The Daily News called it the kind of illness that makes parents hold their breath every hour because the chance of survival is very slim. Olivia passed away on November 17, 1962, just a week after onset, before the measles vaccine was invented. Patricia left the set immediately. No longer the silver screen star striding on the red carpet. Patricia quietly appeared in hospital corridors with disheveled hair, an old sweater holding a cold cup of coffee. A Life magazine reporter recalled Patricia sitting motionless for hours by her daughter's bed, only stroking her hair and whispering something no one else could hear. Roald Dahl, instead of writing usual fairy tales, went to the hospital seeking connections with top doctors from New York to London. The Guardian later revealed he once wrote a desperate letter to a neurologist in England, asking for advice on any method that could help his daughter recover. A week passed like years. Every time Olivia opened her eyes, Patricia tried to smile despite tears soaking her. But in the end, the girl didn't make it. Roald Dahl later wrote letters supporting the measles vaccine, describing the pain of losing a child as measles turned into a terrible thing called measles encephalitis, and he became an advocate for vaccination. Patricia, though she overcame, but that pain affected her life, leading to divorce in 1983. Updated to 2025, Olivia's story is still told to promote vaccines, like in articles on Gavi.org. This story shows the power of medicine and human will, but also reveals helplessness before illness in the pre-vaccine era. Personally, I see Patricia Neal as a model of resilience, and this makes me appreciate more the mothers who sacrificed silently. especially when thinking about how illness can change everything in a blink. And similarly, decades later, Toni Braxton, the Grammy-winning singer, began another journey, fighting to pull her son out of the silent world that autism had imprisoned. Ninth is Toni Braxton. Her son didn't know how to speak until he was 4. In the spring of 2005, People magazine published a series of photos of Toni Braxton radiant on the red carpet in a sparkling dress, with a charming smile. No one that night knew that just hours after leaving the stage lights, she would sit curled up in a small room watching her second son, Diesel Kai Braxton Lewis, sit silently in the corner, eyes directed to some distant place beyond her reach. Her son's silence initially only made Toni slightly worried, but months passed. Not once did he call Mom. No smile, no reaction when she sang lullabies. The abnormality began weighing heavily on the heart of a woman living in the world of sound. A specialist in Los Angeles, after a series of evaluations, delivered the diagnosis of autism at age 3. The child may never communicate like other children, the doctor said. And those words were like a knife stabbing into every note in Toni's mind. She once thought God was punishing her for a previous abortion, as she shared in her memoir. The Los Angeles Times later reported that Toni paused many music projects to focus on finding ways to care for her son. She traveled to therapy centers in California, attended workshops, and talked to other parents in similar situations. She learned to use picture boards, color cards, short songs, and patient eye contact to break each brick in the wall of silence. There were days Toni sat for hours in front of her son, waiting for even a glance or the slightest lip movement. "I don't care how long it takes. As long as I get a signal from him, I'll continue," she shared in an interview with Access Hollywood. Then a small miracle happened. The first time Diesel spoke at age 4, though not complete but clear enough. Toni burst into tears. From one word, he spoke full sentences. In 2016, Toni declared Diesel no longer showed signs of autism, though the autism community argued that autism cannot be fully cured but only well managed. Updated to 2025, Diesel, now 22, is a model and actor, graduated from Howard University, and Toni proudly shared on People that he is proof of early therapy. She has 2 children with ex-husband Kerry Lewis, and Diesel often appears with his mother. Toni Braxton's case emphasizes the role of early therapy in autism, and she has contributed to changing public perception, despite debates about curing. I see this as inspiration for parents, especially at our age, looking back on raising children and grandchildren, and it adds a layer of mystery. Does autism really disappear or just get controlled? Toni's story reminds the public of another family that went through similar challenges. Beyoncé and Jay-Z, when they faced Blue Ivy's hearing issues from early years, though with many rumors. 10th is Beyoncé and Jay-Z, the journey to regain perfection for their daughter. They are the embodiment of perfection. Beyoncé, the queen of the stage with a powerful voice and unforgettable performance moments. Jay-Z, the rap legend and music mogul. On the red carpet, they shine as if nothing can touch them. But behind the smiles for the cameras, the Carter family once went through months where neither money nor fame could soothe. When Blue Ivy turned 4 in 2016, Beyoncé noticed something wrong. The girl wouldn't turn when her mother called from close distance, or frowned when hearing high-frequency music. Initially, the family thought it was just childish distraction, but a hearing test at a neurology clinic in New York ended with words Beyoncé would never forget. "Your daughter has hearing issues. If we don't intervene early, her ability to hear and speak will be permanently affected." That was the moment Beyoncé's heart sank. Sound is not just work. It is the lifeblood of her family. The thought of her daughter living in a world without melody, without applause, almost suffocated her. From that day, the couple's schedule changed completely. Beyoncé paused many projects, spending hours each day sitting with her daughter, singing slow songs, repeating phrases so Blue Ivy could focus on hearing and imitating. Jay-Z, even on international tours, always brought his daughter along to not miss any therapy session. Billboard once wrote that they turned every hotel room into a mini sound training room, where guitar strums, rhythmic claps, and the mother's voice blended with the child's laughter. The first months were exhausting and full of tears. In some sessions, Blue Ivy was silent for dozens of minutes, staring out the window. But Beyoncé remained patient, placing her hand on her daughter and whispering, "Mom's here. Listen to me." Slowly, small reactions appeared. A glance at Mom when music started, a slight nod when her name was called, and then the tiny voice began to hum, trembling but wonderful enough to make both parents cry. In 2021, at just 9 years old, Blue Ivy stepped on stage to receive a Grammy, becoming the youngest artist in history to win the award. The clear voice and going through the hall erased all memories of those fearful months. For Beyoncé and Jay-Z, it was not just a moment of glory. It was proof that love and perseverance can bring voice back from the brink of silence. However, there are many rumors, like Blue Ivy having autism or other issues, but the family hasn't confirmed. And Blue Ivy, now 13, is pursuing music, even speaking out about her father's 2024 lawsuits. Updated 2025, Blue Ivy appears in videos and social media, smiling radiantly, and the family remains private about health. This couple used their resources to overcome, but the core is family love, and rumors add a layer of mystery to the story. I see this as modern proof for the video's theme, where fame isn't everything, but love is the key, especially with strange conspiracy theories like Blue Ivy being transgender. And that story reminds of another father from old Hollywood, Lloyd Nolan, who had to face similar pain raising one of the first children in the U.S. diagnosed with autism. 11th is Lloyd Nolan. His son was one of the first autism cases diagnosed in America in the mid-20th century. When America didn't even know what to call this illness, Lloyd Nolan was utterly stunned to learn that his son, Jay Nolan, was among the first officially diagnosed autism cases in the 1950s. It wasn't just a medical conclusion. It was like a strange sentence hanging overhead. No one could explain and no one knew how to handle. At that time, the word autism only appeared in a few thin research papers. Medicine hadn't found the cause, and society barely understood or accepted it. The Nolan family had no guidebooks, no support networks, no internet to search for answers. Instead, they received harsh advice from some doctors. Send the boy to a specialized facility. There, he will be less of a burden on the family. Lloyd, who had played dozens of strong male roles on screen in films like the Michael Shayne series, now stood at a crossroads in real life. Following that advice meant leaving his son forever. Staying meant stepping into unexplored territory, where every day was a new experiment. He chose the unknown. That choice completely changed Lloyd's life. He turned down many film contracts, missing lucrative opportunities just to stay home, patiently teaching Jay skills that other children had naturally, like looking into someone's eyes, holding a spoon to eat, stacking blocks. There were days Jay sat still for hours, staring into space. Lloyd sat beside silently, placing his hand on his son's shoulder like a silent promise. "Dad won't leave you." When Jay finally uttered his first words, Lloyd felt like he heard the most wonderful music of his life. Not lines, not audience applause, but the voice of the son he once feared losing forever. Many years later, newspapers like the Los Angeles Times mentioned him not just as one of Hollywood's most reliable actors, but also as a steadfast father ahead of his time. But Lloyd didn't stop at his family. In a society that barely acknowledged the existence of autistic children, he stood up with his voice and status to urge the government and community to pay attention to the issue. In 1972, Lloyd publicly spoke about Jay's autism, becoming one of the first celebrities to do so. and he founded J. Nolan Community Services in 1975, now celebrating 50 years in 2025, supporting thousands of autistic people through special education programs and telethons. When he passed away in 1985, at 83, friends remembered Lloyd Nolan not just for his films, but as a symbol of a father's love, overcoming all barriers. Because in a world not ready to accept his son, Lloyd chose to hold the boy tight and never let go. J. Nolan has passed away, but his legacy continues through the organization named after him. From analysis, Lloyd Nolan was a pioneer in autism awareness, and his story paved the way for later generations, as praised in the Autism Light blog in 2012. I see him as inspiration, reminding us of social responsibility toward the disabled, and the mystery is how a supporting actor became a real hero. You've just heard the behind-the-scenes stories, where Hollywood legends and beyond are not just stars but also fathers and mothers who endured the deepest pains for their disabled or ill children. They sacrificed, persevered, and loved their children wholeheartedly despite all losses. And you, what do you think helped them stand firm before such great losses? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If these stories touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to not miss future videos. Thank you for listening, and see you in other mysterious Hollywood stories.